Iowa City is a unique community. This uniqueness is shaped by the people who contribute their ideas, their time, and their energy to the life of Iowa City and the university. Welcome to a series of biographical interviews of special women and men who have affected this community. Their contributions have been valuable, their lives creative and full. What brought them here? Who influenced them? What contributions are they the most pleased about? These and other questions will be explored during this series of interviews entitled, Tell Me Your Story. Words to describe the leadership of my guest, John Colloton, Director of University Hospitals and Clinics, are excellent, thorough, intense, visionary but detail-oriented, fair, hardworking, and demanding the best from himself and others. Mr. Colloton, the director since 1971, has received innumerable awards and honors and serves on many health-related boards. In 1987, he was elected chairman of the Association of American Medical Colleges, only the second non-physician so honored in the association's 112-year history. In 1990, John was awarded the American Hospital Association's highest distinction, the Distinguished Service Award. The citation for this honor reads, quote, "Few have been as effective or eloquent in the support of research and education to enhance the quality of care nationwide as John W. Colloton." Under John's leadership, the hospital staff has grown from over 2,500 to over 7,200. The budget has grown from 24 million to 307 million. Today, nearly 500,000 patients come to the hospital and clinics each year. In addition to managing the largest university-owned teaching hospital and one of the best hospitals in the nation, Mr. Colloton has guided the remodeling and expansion of facilities like Boyd Tower, Carver Pavilion, Colloton Pavilion, Papa John, to name a few. John, a native Iowan, is a husband and father of 3 children, Steve, Laura, and Ann. Thanks, John, for being my guest.
My pleasure, Emma. Nice to be with you.
Let's start your story in Mason City, Iowa, where you were born in 1931. You grew up in kind of a large family, didn't you?
Yes, we had 5 children, 4 boys, 1 girl. And I was, I guess, in the middle of that.
Mm-hmm. Did you have typical interests? Did you play ball? And
yes, we had a lot of interest in high school and junior high school sports, particularly in basketball and baseball. And then, of course, Clear Lake was nearby, so we spent a lot of time over there looking around for the girls, I guess, at that time. But we were typical of kids who were growing up in Iowa communities of 25,000.
What were your parents' expectations of you?
Parents' expectations?
Of you?
Well, I think that their hopes and aspirations were that we would all go on to college and be good citizens. Mm-hmm. And I think beyond that, the matter of the work ethic was very strong in the family, and that, of course, came from parents and grandparents.
After you left Mason City, you were off to Loras College in Dubuque, Iowa, graduated magna cum laude, and you were then off to the Army, and the Army sent you overseas. What were you doing? In what capacity did you serve?
I was stationed over in Augsburg, Germany, just about 30 kilometers north of Munich, in the 5th Division headquarters in the Finance Corps. And our responsibility over there at that time was to make sure that the 5th Division GIs got paid properly every month. And my responsibility was in that general section of GI pay.
Mm-hmm. What brought you back to Iowa, and Iowa City?
I would say that was kind of serendipitous. I was intending to come back to Iowa and to graduate school here at the university, probably in the area of business administration. And when I had been at Loras, I was running around with 10 or 12 fellows, all of whom went to medical school, every single one of them. And therefore they were deferred, and I, by virtue of not going to medical school, was then drafted into the Army. And when I was over there, about 2 months before being discharged, I had a letter from one of them saying that the field for you is hospital administration, a field that I'd never heard of. So on our base was the 11th Field Hospital, and I went over there, and they had a library, medical library, and I asked the librarian, who was a nice young German woman, whether she had any books on hospital administration. And she didn't, but she said, I'll write to the States and get you one. So a couple of weeks I came back, and she had the book, and I read it, and it was obvious that the professional management of hospitals was coming into a new era in this country, and that there was going to be a lot of opportunity in it. So my friend had pointed out to me that Iowa had one of the most outstanding educational programs in the country at that time, so I wrote for the matriculation forms and got back a request to write a 500-page essay on why I wanted to be a hospital administrator. Now, I had just learned the term, you see, a couple days before, and had read one book. So but I did write the 500 words, and then was accepted, and I came back in '55.
And then after you graduated in hospital administration, you joined staff. I know there was a year you were in Des Moines, and then you came as a business manager.
Right.
Did you ever think you were going to be here for 33 years?
No, as a matter of fact, I didn't. You probably recall that the university hospitals was not a very attractive environment in those days. You know, it was kind of obsolete and not very progressive in terms of its ambience. So I kind of thought that I would come back here for a couple of years and get exposed to some very capable individuals who were running the institution, and then move on to a middle-sized community hospital somewhere. And that was my thought about it at that time. And then, of course, when I did get back and started to learn more about the institution and the tremendous wealth of talented people who function in this institution each day, and the tremendous good that we do for the people of Iowa, not only the patients, but young men and women who want to become doctors and nurses and pharmacists, then I became very intrigued with the fact that this really was a wonderful resource, and here 33 years later, I'm still here.
Here you are. You've taken the University Hospital through some major remodeling and expansion, and done it without any state appropriated funds, is that right?
Yes.
How did you manage that? How was that done?
Well, let me say, first of all, we have built about, I guess, $370 million of new replacement hospitals since 1976. And that has been financed by a combination of gift funds from people like Roy Carver and John Papajohn and others, and then 2 or 3 small federal grants way up in the beginning, and the balance of it has come from funded depreciation, which is an element paid by all third-party payors, that is Blue Cross and Medicare, that is actually awarded hospitals for the purpose of replenishing the capital. And in well-managed hospitals, that funding is segregated and maintained for use in replenishing the capital. And that's what we've done here, and therefore it has been unnecessary for us to go forth to the regents and the legislature with any requests from the state treasury, and that's something that a lot of us take pride in, that we have kind of been a self-due state operation rather than one that has been
Always the hands off.
right.
There's a wonderful story I'd like for you to share. I read in a newspaper article about you when you had a pavilion named in your honor. There's a picture hanging as you walk into the Colloton Pavilion, and you overheard somebody talk about you. Would you share that story? I think it's wonderful.
Oh, yes, there was. I didn't actually overhear it. I tell you, the way that happened was one of the housekeeping staff members was out there cleaning in that atrium, and a couple of women came up upon that photo, and I looked at it and then remarked, he was such a young man, I wonder what he died of. And of course then the housekeeping staff come down and tell the secretaries about that, and that's where I found out about it.
You are young, that's true. I want to ask you, I think it's quite remarkable over the years to have watched the University Hospital become more humanized and personalized and more user-friendly and less intimidating, because so many thousands of people, it's like a small city over there. How did you do that? Did it start in the early 70s that you made a concerted effort to do this?
Yes, it did. I think like all large hospitals, we were struggling with the concept of how to break this major mass of humanity, which is now in excess of some 14,000 people under that roof each day, down into smaller units, so that people could feel more comfortable and get more personal attention. And we started this whole series of initiatives in the early 70s in which we accorded that a very high institutional priority. Starting, of course, with the environment, in which we brought in living plants, and Joyce Somerwell came along to run our art program, and some of the performing arts were brought into the atriums, and flowers around in the institution. But the real bottom line is that humans make an institution humanistic, and therefore we accorded that a very high priority in terms of establishing a volunteer program back in the 1970s that would bring some very talented people from this community, both adults and students, into an interface with the patients and visitors in a whole different array of services, such as language interpretation, delivering flowers, writing letters, transporting patients, and all of those kinds of things. I think now we've got close to 850 volunteers over there. And then we established a patient representative program, which now has 5 full-time individuals who spend their time straightening out the snafus that patients and visitors invariably become involved in. And then, of course, I think the whole institution, as you indicated, we have 7,500 staff now, and those individuals are very oriented and educated to be highly respectful of the individual patient, or the patient as an individual human being. And that is reflected in the staff motto, which is, "Our service reflects me," and that being interpreted to mean that each and every one of us have an obligation to reflect ourselves to these individuals that we are serving in the manner in which we would like to be accommodated if we were the patient. So that has been something that we've concentrated on over the years. And then, of course, in a large hospital like we have, when you break it down into individual clinical services, for example, the Department of Internal Medicine would have something like 200 beds in the institution, and several thousand clinic patients each month, and we try to administer that as if it is a discrete unit within the institution, and then have all of that staff concentrating on those patients, and then to geographically bring it together so that patients kind of think of that as their hospital as opposed to the whole institution.
John, what have been some of your greatest challenges and obstacles over the last years?
Well, the single biggest obstacle has been to get everyone on the same wavelength. I think Iowans, tend to be kind of modest and reserved, and when you start developing a plan such as we put together back in the early 70s, in which you're not only developing the largest university and teaching hospital in the nation, but also a very expansive one in terms of physical facilities. There's a lot of people who wonder whether or not Iowa really should have that kind of a resource. And there is some of that within the university and more of it, of course, around the state. So it's a real challenge to communicate with the appropriate constituencies to explain why this is a very sound investment for this state and the benefits that will accrue to the quality of life in this state, not only in terms of patient care, but in terms of educational programs for young Iowans and keeping the medical care delivery system on the frontiers of science through the research programs and all of that. And that's a very big challenge when you're in a rural state with differing levels of economic development and the ups and downs of the economies that we've had over the last 20 years, with the farm economy adjusting. So that's been a very severe challenge all the way along, but fortunately we had a lot of talented people in the university hospitals who set their sights high and had a vision, and now, some 20 years later, we are within an eyelash of being where we want to be.
So what are your goals for this next decade?
Well, for the university hospital,
yes.
The goals are first to complete that last little bit of what we set in place in the early 70s.
Excuse me, what is that last little bit?
That last little bit would be completion of the upper floors of the interior of the Papa John Pavilion. And that pavilion will bring into being a new sports medicine clinic, spine diagnostic and treatment center, a hand service, a new clinical cancer center, all new facilities for adult and children's psychiatry, a new surgical ICU, and a couple of other units up on the upper levels. So when we get done with that, it's about 500,000 gross square feet of space in there, and about 20% of the university hospital will be in that pavilion. A lot of folks don't realize how big it is, but we've got to complete that, and then we have two other major and highly prestigious departments to take care of, one being the Department of Ophthalmology, the other being the Department of Otolaryngology. So we want to go out on the south side of the Papa John Pavilion and build a couple of institutes there, one for eye and the other for ear, nose, and throat. So when we get those done, we will have a pretty fair country teaching hospital.
Oh, country teaching hospital. I read a quote by you in a newspaper article. It said, "Medical care is the most important human service we have. It's really not a commodity." Would you speak to that quote?
Yes. The government and other payors of the cost of medical services have been justifiably frustrated with the rapidly escalating costs through the years. And a number of different formulae have been tried to moderate that cost increase, most of them being markedly unsuccessful because of the fact that there is about $20 billion a year now being invested in medical research. New services, new technology are coming online. The population is becoming more aged. We have problems with AIDS, and all of those kinds of things tend to continue that cost curve up. So in the early 80s, the business sector primarily promulgated the theory that the way to control health costs is to apply marketplace economics, and that is to treat medical services as if it is a commodity rather than a human service. I didn't say it exactly that way, but that's really the way it comes out to be. And in my judgment, that particular mechanism for controlling health costs has been a dismal failure. In fact, it has exacerbated the problem rather than resolved it. And I think that one of these days we ought to come back to recognize that it's a human service, that we have to plan and plan the services in accord with the needs of society and be responsible to do it in the most cost-effective way and not be duplicating highly expensive services just for the purpose of making money, or largely for the purpose of making money. So that was the basis of that particular comment, and it's a controversial area, but I think things are tending now to move away from the competition model into a more rationalized system for delivering medical services.
How do you think we stack up in the United States, our health care delivery, compared to countries that have like nationalized health insurance?
Well, I think that the United States has got the very best system in the world for maybe 275 million people. And the other 50 million people who are uninsured or underinsured have considerably less than the best quality of medical care. And therefore, I think the answer to it is to preserve the quality that we have, but find ways to expand the services to encompass all citizens. But there's nothing wrong with the basic quality of medical care in this country. I think that it's outstanding, and what we got to do is try to find a way to get it delivered to everyone rather than just those who happen to have the resources with which to buy it.
That's fodder and food for thought for a whole nother show, is how we're going to do this.
Right.
I want to turn your story, John, to a more personal side. Who or what event had a major influence on you? Or what person?
Well, I think I'd have to divide that into maybe personal and professional. I think early on in life, my parents and grandparents, as I indicated earlier, had a lot to do with the formation of values and work ethic and aspirations to do the very best you can do with the talents that the good Lord's given you. When I completed my education and came upon the university hospitals, then I came into contact with two very talented executives who were quite different, very different. One of them was Dr. Gerhard Hartmann, who was the director of the university hospital for some 25 years prior to when I became involved in that position, and another person by the name of Mr. Glenn Clayson, who was the associate director. And I learned a tremendous amount of hospital administration from those two individuals in a very short span of time. And then at that same time, when I was becoming involved in the upper levels of administration later on, I had the good fortune to be befriended by some very distinguished physicians like Dr. Reuben Phlox, and Dr. Maurice Van Allen, Dr. Sidney Ziffrin, and I learned an awful lot from them about how physicians viewed medical practice and the academic responsibilities of functioning in a teaching hospital. So then after that, I would say just the overall dynamics of being around an institution that brings 7,500 people in there each day who are not only very dedicated but very, very talented. And you can go out of my office and walk around the institution for 30 minutes and come in contact with a very skilled craftsman or a very diligent housekeeper, a caring nurse, and an hour later you can be sitting down with some brilliant physician who's got a great idea about a new program that we can implement. So it's a very dynamic institution that's very rewarding in that sense, and that tends to stimulate anyone who's involved with it to go the extra mile, to do your very best to make the dreams and aspirations of all of these people come true.
And you met your wife, Mary Ann, here at University Hospital, was it?
Yes, yes. She went through the College of Nursing and then joined the University Hospital Nursing Department. And I had the good fortune of visiting a patient, a friend of mine, an old high school mate, up on the 3rd floor one day, and Mary Ann was the nurse who came in to take care of him, and he was in isolation, so we were all in masks, but he did introduce her to me, and then that eventually went on to culminate in our being married in October of 1960.
You have raised, you and Mary Ann, 3 children in Iowa City. Tell me where your kids are and what they're up to.
Okay, the oldest one, Steve, graduated from Yale Law School 2 or 3 years back, and then did a clerkship with Chief Justice Rehnquist, and he is now in the Office of Legal Counsel of the Justice Department in Washington, D.C. And Laura, our older daughter, is a graduate of Duke University with a major in psychology, and then she went on and got a graduate degree at Berkeley in education, and has for the past 2 years been a teacher in a school in Vallejo, California, right outside of Berkeley, which is, I believe, about 60% minority enrollment, and she's enjoying it immensely. And she'll be coming back to Iowa City this summer to be married, first one of the 3. And then Ann, our youngest, just graduated from the University of Michigan in December of last year in psychology and sociology, and she will be shortly involved with a social agency, I believe in the care of the homeless, somewhere for about a year, and then going back to graduate school thereafter.
Must be very proud of your children.
Yes, we are very proud of them.
You have a notorious reputation for working hard, many days in a row with not taking many breaks, but you do get away once in a while. What do you do to relax?
Well, I go to most of all the Hawkeye events when I'm here in town, particularly in football and basketball. And then I used to do a lot of hunting in my younger years when I had more time. I do that occasionally. I'm also involved with a group of 6 Iowa Cityans who have been going to Canada each year for a 4-day fishing trip, which we do each June or July. And that's a very, very relaxing excursion for us. And we tell a lot of lies, and solve a lot of problems, and catch a lot of fish.
And you have a trophy, I hear, in your office of a how many pound muskie?
It's northern pike.
Oh, it's a pike. Okay.
It's 42-inch long, 24-pound northern pike, which was the largest fish that we caught in, I believe, the first 9 years that we went up there. We've been going 11 now. And the very next year, one of the fellows, Dr. Fred Smith, caught not a 24-pounder, but a 32-pounder, which I think will probably remain as our all-time record for quite some time.
And you're going again this summer?
Yes, we are.
Yeah. Well, John, you've had a remarkable career here, and I know it's not over. You've got many things you want to do, and I appreciate you coming today to talk to us.
Well, it's been a great pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
My guest has been John Colloton, Director of the University Hospitals and Clinics and one of the nation's leading health officials. Mr. Colloton is also the Assistant to the President of the University for Health Services. A native of Mason City, Iowa, he has served as director for 20 years. He has received awards and honors and serves on various national health-related boards, including chair of the Board of Directors of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Iowa and chairman of the American Association of Medical Colleges. Last year, John Colloton received the American Hospital Association's highest award, the Distinguished Service Award. In a congratulatory message, Iowa Governor Terry Branstad stated, "Colloton's leadership has created one of the finest medical facilities in the country," end of quote. He and his wife, Mary Ann, have raised 3 children in Iowa City, Steve, Laura, and Ann. His career has been one of excellence. He is a man of vision who gets things done thoroughly and with distinction. We are indeed fortunate that John Colloton's story has included the University Hospital, Iowa City, and the state of Iowa.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.